Cover-up? A House committee releasing a scathing report over former IRS official Lois Lerner's involvement in the targeting scandal. It's considering holding her in contempt, but even without her testimony, some say these emails from Lerner are the smoking gun, calling Tea Party groups dangerous and showing it wasn't just some rogue IRS workers in Cincinnati, a claim the administration kept making, including the president.
You've got an office in Cincinnati, in the IRS office, that I think for bureaucratic reasons is trying to streamline what is a difficult law to interpret about whether a nonprofit is actually a political organization.
But Lerner said Cincinnati should not be included in all this. So is it time for the White House to come clean? Hi, everybody. I'm David Asman. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus with Steve Forbes, Mike Ozanian, Elizabeth McDonald, Bruce Japsen, Rick Unger, and John Tamny. John, let's start with you. The White House was dumping all this on Cincinnati, but these Lerner memos show clearly she wanted to keep Cincinnati out of it.
Yeah, it's time for the White House to come clean. I mean, the reality is that the course of history may have been changed by the IRS's actions. Groups formed to influence the 2012 elections, groups formed to blunt the Obamacare ground game, were muzzled by the IRS, and this could have changed electoral results, could have changed legislative results. The administration has to come clean about what it knew and what it did.
Rick, the president said there's not a smidgen of scandal here. It looks like there's more than a smidgen, wouldn't you say?
Well, look, you have to point out here, Lois Lerner does not and did not work for the White House. That's number one. The question kind of presumes that this couldn't have happened without White House knowledge. And yet, I actually went back and reviewed it. It was a good opportunity to do it. So far, nobody has stepped forward with any evidence that links the White House to any of the things that Ms. Lerner or Cincinnati or wherever were doing here. So aren't we still jumping the gun? You're still innocent until proven guilty.
You are, but on the other hand, there is a lot more evidence coming out, EMAC, and you look at the timing of all this. The 2010 election, the Democrats were decimated by Republicans using the Tea Party. It was just about that time that the IRS targeted the Tea Party. Coincidence?
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I'd love to be able to live in a world like Rick Unger does. God bless him. I love Rick Unger. But, you know, where, you know, you cover your eyes, you cover your ears, and you accept the narrative that's out there without getting a special prosecutor to tell us really what happened about the White House's potential involvement. You know, we're a government by the people, for the people. This isn't government by the government, for the government. This is what the narrative is feeling like. The broad zoom perspective. What is going on with the DNA of our government where we're allowing the IRS to behave like this without any checks and balances, without a special prosecutor to get to the bottom of the stifling of political dissent? That's what's going on.
And Bruce, the fact is that the White House and all their minions have been throwing one office and a group of people working in Cincinnati under the bus, when in fact it went much higher than Cincinnati. But the Cincinnati people, by the way, are not taking it lightly. In fact, there's a woman named Elizabeth Hoffaker who worked in that office. Here's what she had to say about being thrown under the bus.
Sir, I was deeply offended. I mean, it impugned my reputation and the reputation of other agents and basically all federal employees. I felt like it was a nuclear strike. I felt they were blaming us.
Bruce, you shouldn't be able to get away with that, should you?
Well, I don't know that I agree with Rick on the fact that I do agree with Rick that we don't really have a shred of evidence yet relative to the White House. And I do think this does potentially give other IRS workers who didn't have anything to do with anything in Cincinnati, whatever happened. But I think Chairman Issa sort of blew it in the last week because he pulled the plug on the microphone of the Democrat who was just, we don't even know what he was going to say. And he's made this more of a political story. Yeah, he made this more of a political story, and then you can now have the White House saying that this is politics, and it delays everything, and it looks like politics.
But Steve, what's more important, decorum during a committee hearing or getting to the truth of what happened?
Yeah, Chairman Issa apologized for that hissy fit. It was a mistake, but it was a sideshow. And the fact of the matter is there hasn't been much evidence because there hasn't been much of an investigation. The Justice Department made sure that didn't happen, but 150 visits to the White House, all of these incriminating memos, it is a whitewash, and that's why, sadly, we need a special prosecutor, things that I hate. But this administration can investigate itself. And you saw with that smug interview the president had with O'Reilly saying there's not a smidgen of corruption. And Nixon said he knew nothing about Watergate.
Let's just play that soundbite if anybody missed it.
You're saying no corruption?
No.
None.
No, there were some boneheaded decisions. Out of a
but
local
no
office.
mass corruption.
Not even mass corruption. Not even a smidgen of corruption.
But, Mike, the fact is that ICE's report that came out this week mentions a lot of inconsistencies. It sure looks like Lois Lerner committed perjury because in February 2012, she testified that she never changed the criteria for evaluating tax-exempt organizations, but they found a memo from June 2011, about a year earlier, in which she directed the criteria to be changed. That sounds like perjury. That's more than a smidgen.
You know, Dave, when I look at this Obama administration, and whether you're looking at this case or whatever, you got to look at the broad pattern here to see just how much they deceive and lie, right? They never told the truth about Benghazi. They deceived us on that. The president himself lied for years about Obamacare. Eric Holder, the attorney general, was held in contempt by Congress for the gun smuggling in Mexico. I mean, they have no credibility at all here. So, you know, I have to side with those who think that right up to the president, they knew what was going on with the IRS just based on the broad pattern. They lie and deceive.
Rick,
about
I got to ask, it's a hypothetical, forgive me, but if this was being done by Republican administration, do you think that you would be calling for a special prosecutor with all of this evidence that's been leaking out?
Actually, I would, and this may surprise you. I actually agree with Lizzie more than you might think. I think we should have a special prosecutor, and one of the things I would like about that is that a special prosecutor would easily discern between Lois Lerner and the White House. I think it's a really bad idea that we keep conflating those two.
No, wait,
but
wait,
I'm
wait.
actually all for a special prosecutor.
The IRS works for the Treasury Department. The person running the Treasury is a political appointee. IRS chief counsel is a political appointee. When asked in Congress, during Congress, what do you know about this? He said, I don't know, 80 times. Doesn't that tell you that something weird is going on here?
And Steve,
it
Steve, let's get
that it came from the White House.
Okay, hold on a second. Steve, I want to get to John Tamny's point, which is very important. Don't want to go over that. There was a political election that may have been influenced by what the IRS was doing. We saw the political power of the Tea Party in 2010. It was enormous. It wasn't used by any means to the same extent. Maybe that was the Republicans' fault, but the fact is that this could have affected the outcome of the 2012 election, no?
Yeah, you already had organizations mobilized, volunteer organizations mobilized, which made a huge difference in 2010. And the White House knew, they knew that they were in trouble in 2012, and they had to emasculate these organizations, and they did. So they were less concerned about going out and doing their job, more concerned about staying out of trouble with the IRS. It was suppression. And the White House, the fact that they appointed somebody who made political contributions to the president to do the inside investigation. I mean, come on.
Even Rick thought that was ridiculous. But hold on a second. I want to get back to John Tamny because he brought up this point. John, do you think that had the Tea Party not been focused on the way it was by the IRS, they could have had more effect in the 2012 election campaign?
Well, I think your question, your point answers it, of course. Look what happened in the 2010 elections, and so there's a very real incentive to blunt the actions of these groups. And the idea that there's not a smidgen of evidence, if there were no evidence, the Obama administration would be forthcoming with all the details and almost investigating itself, calling for a special prosecutor.
They haven't been.
Knowing well.
Hold on, Rick, go ahead.
You're assuming they haven't been forthcoming. You know, the problem is your presumption continues to be, your presumption continues to be that they know something they aren't telling us. If they don't know something, they are coming forward.
Where are the emails? Where are the emails and memos?
All the emails that have been subpoenaed from the IRS have not been turned over. Why? Because they're incriminating. And the IRS ultimately reports to the White House.
Quickly, Rick, quickly.
Yeah, of course. So does everybody. Has anybody come forward to say that the White House told them to do something? Nobody. Look, we have an American system of justice, like it or not. And by the way, if it was a Republican, I'd say the same thing.
Memo that is contradicting what has been said under testimony. There's a word for that, Rick. You know the legal term. It's called perjury. It's called perjury. These are high officials. As long as there's suspicion of perjury, I think we need a further investigation. Even Rick thinks there should be a special prosecutor. Coming up next, we have seen plenty of union protests before, but not like this one. Why big labor is now fighting a $100 million donation to help a hospital create jobs and save lives.